We are at the peak of harvest season. So often we think this is what gardening is all about, and in a way it is. I love harvesting. It is so rewarding and it makes all our hard work worth it. But I think we often forget about all the work that goes into this months before the harvest season gets here, and all the work we put into our garden every single day. It's a lot. And in many cases, it can become overwhelming. In this video, I want to talk about garden overwhelm and what I do to overcome it. In several of my other videos, as I'm doing a tour or harvesting, I often mention all the things that I have to do, like thinning the carrot seedlings, pruning tomatoes, pruning leaves from my squash plants that I have powdery mildew, repotting my greenstock tower, weeding the beds, the paths, keeping up with the harvest. All those things need to get done, and I have full intention of doing them. But the reality is that it doesn't always get done. And one of my goals this year was not to have any empty spaces in my garden. It's been about a week since we harvested onions from this bed, and this bed is still empty. The cabbage seedlings that I planted that were supposed to go into this onion bed are not doing so well. My squash plants are a tangled mess, and at this point, I don't know if there's anything I can do about that. There's so much harvesting to be done every single day, and some things just get away from me. The zucchinis get too big, the cucumbers are bigger than the way I like them to be. The green beans are way past their prime. Our walking paths are extremely weedy. They look like a jungle. And there are areas in my garden that I am genuinely intimidated walking into because they are just so overgrown and not well manicured like I had hoped they would be. There are pests attacking my plants. We have asparagus beetles, squash bugs. We have lost the battle to the squash vine borer. There are fungal diseases attacking my cucumbers and powdery mildew on my zucchini. And when I think about all those things, it all just feels overwhelming. And maybe you feel overwhelmed too about all the tasks that need to get done. Because it's August and we still have a lot of time left in the season. It's too soon to quit. But at the same time, some of us are starting to think about our fall garden, and it can be overwhelming to think about our fall garden when we feel like we're drowning in just what we have going on right now. And the last couple of weeks, I have been feeling overwhelmed. But I am determined not to let that overwhelm steal my joy and my love for my garden, because I do love my garden. It still brings me so much peace. It still brings me so much joy. And one of the things that I do to help with the overwhelm is to just do a little bit each day. Or to be honest, just do a little bit whenever I'm able to. This week, I had the intention of working outside and getting something done every single day. But we had 2 or 3 very rainy, wet, and just very yucky days, and I honestly did not feel like being out there in the rain or after the rain where everything is muddy and wet. And in many cases, like pruning for example, it's not a good idea to do that when the plants are wet. So I wasn't able to do something every day. But on the days that I could, I was intentional about coming outside and getting some things done. I was able to take care of my strawberry tower that was just so overgrown, and it had so many runners, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I just didn't want them there. There really is no need for them because those runners have no place to root. Pruning off the runners will help my ever-bearing strawberries to focus on producing more fruit. It also helped me check to see if there are any pests or disease. The plants were a tangled mess, and now they look so much better and they will have much better airflow. Another day, I spent a quiet morning pruning zucchini leaves. The powdery mildew just continues to spread, but it won't get out of control if I keep up with the pruning. And pruning can be so good for the plant. And I was able to find some zucchinis to harvest. I was also able to notice that a couple of plants were just too far gone. The squash vine borer had claimed another victim, and I needed to pull those out. Pruning the zucchini leaves also helped me access an area of the garden that was overgrown. The zucchini plants are slowly making their way across the path and onto the cucumber vines. But after cutting away some leaves, I was able to see that I had so many cucumbers that needed to be picked. I found so many, and I'm so glad because if they would have stayed on the vine one more day, it might have been too late. But I did it. I finished another task, and with every little thing that I can check off my to-do list, it feels like a victory. And I am choosing to celebrate those small victories as opposed to getting overwhelmed about what I haven't done yet. This week, I also worked on another big project, which was pruning and trellising all my tomatoes. I have over 40 tomato plants, and that was a lot of work to do. But I decided to just go out there one day. It was in the evening after dinner, and I was tired, and I really didn't want to do it. But I just started with one plant, then moved to the next one, and then the next until I got it done. And while I was working on the tomatoes, my sons were working on weeding one bed. The weeding right now in our garden just feels so overwhelming. Everything needs to be weeded, not just that one bed. But if I told my sons to go out there and weed the garden, I know they would have felt overwhelmed because that's a lot. Our garden is a large area to weed. So instead, I told them that evening, all I wanted them to focus on was weeding the green bean bed, and that's what they did. And that goal seemed so much more attainable. They were able to accomplish it, and they felt so good about finishing their task as opposed to feeling defeated because they weren't able to weed the whole garden. And I felt so good that day too because I was able to finish pruning and trellising the tomatoes. Yes, I still have so many other things to do. Yes, the pests are still there, but I just focused on one thing. And focusing on the one thing at that moment and not looking at all the things that needed to be done just helped me be in a much better mental space. It helps me not to get overwhelmed about my garden and not starting to feel like this is too much and I just want to quit, because that has crossed my mind a few times. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, I just want to encourage you to make a list of all the things that you need to do. But make sure that the items that you put on your list are very specific tasks that are attainable. For example, instead of saying weed the garden, look and see if there's a specific area that needs it the most, and then focus on that. Write that as one item. In my list for this week, I wrote, weed the green bean bed. And that was a priority because even though there are other areas that needed to be weeded, the green beans are at a point that if we don't do it now, it will just be really hard to do it because they are starting to get really big. So I prioritized on weeding the green bean bed over other parts of the garden. And instead of writing thin carrot seedlings on my list, I wrote thin carrots on raspberry bed. A much more specific task. Yes, I have another bed where I planted carrots that also need to be thinned, but if I let them wait a little bit, they will be okay. But these carrots here needed to be thinned out or it was going to affect the growth of my carrots. This task was way overdue. I tried to space them out at least an inch apart, but I always find that when I let the carrots get this big, it's just so much harder for me to pull them out. Yet, another small task was completed. And that's what I did this week to combat the garden overwhelm. I made a list of small tasks that I wanted to tackle this week. And even though my list seems long, when I look at it and I see that I only have about an hour or 45 minutes to get something done, I can pick one or two things from that list that are doable and I'm able to get them done and then cross them off my list and feel so accomplished. There's still so much more to do in my garden. But today, I am choosing to just love what's happening here, to love the moments in my garden, love the beauty that I'm seeing every day with these flowers and the birds. And I am choosing not to let overwhelm win today.